It was 4 in the morning in Columbus, Ohio. The medical center stood silently in the darkness. An esteemed administrator was being watched closely. Opioids were concealed within crates of health supplies. Surgical theaters remained sealed shut. Body parts were directed through freezers and transport vehicles. Sick individuals simply never returned home. For 9 years, illicit drugs harvested tissues and calculated murders lurked within the clinic until officers entered and the horror was revealed. Please press the like button if you wish for this report to gain wider visibility. Regarding the narcotics traffickers, we are merely losing precious hours. Do not forget that fact. We are squandering our efforts. Such severity involves capital punishment. 12 kilograms of narcotics were stashed in a clinic vault managed by a lady relied upon to guard the infirm and old while victims disappeared within her facility. This was not a typical sidewalk cache. It was a physician's suite transformed into a collection site. The peril did not originate from external sources. It was assassination, pilfered body parts, and treachery dressed in a medical uniform. We will investigate further if you wish to understand the true extent of this web. Terrible individuals and illegal substances destroyed local neighborhoods, creating the biggest policing obstacle in our nation's past, which hopefully remains the greatest ever. It was 4:20 in Columbus, Ohio. The garage of the private facility was quiet with just a few lamps glowing. Moments after that, the stillness was shattered. Federal investigators rushed the doorway with commands that were loud and disciplined. Heavy footwear struck the ground. Communication devices crackled with static. The whole structure tensed up with dread. A location designed for curing illness suddenly seemed dangerous. Officers ascended to the upper level. The administrator's room was secured tight. A heavy sledgehammer struck the entryway, splintering timber and warping steel. The interior appeared ordinary. There were pictures of relatives, blooms, and a tidy workspace. However, beneath that peaceful surface existed something evil. A large strongbox sat there while cutting instruments bored through the dense iron. When it unlocked, the atmosphere shifted. Inside sat 12 kilograms of opioids in wrapped bricks piled like currency, along with a handgun and a secured mobile. Minutes later, the clinic manager, 48-year-old Amina Hassan, was restrained with her medical coat draping loosely. The medical staff watched without speaking. 9 years of confidence vanished in one morning. Press the like button now if you want this inquiry to reach a broader audience, particularly families who still have faith in their clinics. Post the word truth below if you think this operation was merely the start. For many years the facility seemed tranquil. Sick people waited calmly for their turn. Caregivers walked through spotless corridors and relatives believed in every friendly gesture. Nobody guessed a felony ring was operating behind those gates. There were no symbols of gangs or corner peddlers. Everything seemed completely legitimate. However, every week opioids and heroin arrived at the clinic hidden as health inventory. Employees never mentioned narcotics. They utilized the code term special diet medication. Tiny pale containers were transferred between rooms and given to unsuspecting victims, with each holding sufficient poison to ruin entire communities. Monetary logs exposed the reality. The center purchased 10 times more inventory than required. Late-night deliveries showed up with flawless tags for sterile items, medical attire, and testing gear. Contained within were blocks of undiluted opioids. Mothers and fathers took kids for healing. Seniors visited for blood examinations. Employees entrusted the facility with their existence. Meanwhile, a secondary enterprise, a felonious trade, was expanding within the structure, concealed by clipboards, access cards, and courteous grins. Amina Hassan was not managing medical care. She was directing a narcotics route, utilizing the center as a disguise and employing patients as cover. Tap the like button if this reality must not be disregarded. Comment protect if every medical center needs inspection. The most terrifying aspect was not the drugs. It was how the facility learned to end lives lawfully on documents and take their organs without raising doubts. The prey were the neglected seniors, those without kin, the homeless and crash survivors who were drugged before they could talk. They were chosen because nobody would ask about their absence. Inside a concealed surgical theater, officers discovered a method built to make killing appear authorized. Victims were labeled unstable upon entry, and within 60 minutes forms stated they were unlikely to live. 2 autographs from a physician and an administrator authorized urgent tissue donation. Numerous victims never woke up again. A hallway absent from all public blueprints led to a clandestine medical wing. There were harsh lamp steel surfaces and no desire to preserve life. Files identified corpses only by digits, with no relatives, no permission, and no health background. When experts examined the documents, the magnitude stunned everyone. There were hundreds of procedures in 9 years, often lacking death or funeral certificates. Reasons for passing were unclear, never noting tissue extraction. Collected parts were transported in cooled bins marked as donated items for emergencies, merging with health supplies, while cash streamed back through cartel channels like CJNG and Sinaloa. The center had turned into a segment of a global smuggling web. A site intended to cure had learned to make mortality appear legitimate, transforming humans into products with a pen stroke. If this illicit tissue ring frightens you, press like so more individuals see the facts. Comment never if every soul merits safety. Once Amina Hassan was detained, officers understood the clinic was merely the initial breach. Charts in the Federal Operations Center displayed offices, storage sites and shops throughout Ohio, all linked to the identical web. The directive was straightforward: hit every location simultaneously. Before dusk, unmarked fleets traveled across the region. Fortified vans pulled up behind pharmacies. Choppers orbited quietly over icy avenues. Inside a private office, 2 officers breached the rear entrance. The reception area was vacant, but the cellar was not. There were secured freezers filled with airtight boxes. Tags read medical specimens, yet the scent of chemicals was pungent. On a bench lay medical instruments already sanitized and prepared for the subsequent operation. At a depot near the waterway, the circumstances were distinct. Armed individuals waited behind piles of boxes. When federal squads drew near, shooting broke out. Projectiles hit steel surfaces. Sparks erupted from gateways and pavement. Officers took shelter behind cars. Orders were distinct and loud without fear. A stun grenade detonated through a flank window, filling the space with blinding light. The shooting ceased. On the distant side of town, a cooled van attempted to flee. Its motor roared and fumes billowed from the pipe. It smashed through a barrier, aiming for the interstate. 2 federal patrol vehicles sped up, cutting it off at the final second. Rubber squealed loudly. The van slid sideways and stopped. When the gates opened, officers located cartons filled with money and taped medical chests. Inside the chests were human tissues wrapped in plastic and frozen water. At the residence of a lawman, agents discovered huge sums of money stashed in roof panels. At the bank manager's home, they found vault keys and papers revealing funds sent to foreign banks. The roster of names extended by the hour. By evening, scores of individuals had been captured throughout the region. Proof filled vans and desks, including narcotics, guns, banking logs, and surgery records. The operations exposed a horrific reality. A medical center had been the hub, but the sickness had reached everywhere. The barriers meant to guard life had instead shielded a felonious kingdom. Ohio awoke to blinking lights, sirens, and the noise of aircraft. The vow of security had been violated, and now the whole state realized how profound the treachery had gone. By the next morning, the scope of the inquiry no longer resembled a medical mishap. It resembled a synchronized machine. Amina Hassan had not worked independently, and agents realized it. Medical centers, offices, and depots were merely the exterior. To last for 9 years, the web required defense at every tier. The documents seized from Hassan's desk were packed with names. They were not just patients or vendors, but magistrates, constables, bankers, auditors, and civic heads. Some identities were penned completely. Some were letters followed by digits. All of them had accepted funds masked as advisory charges, special tasks, or philanthropic gifts. Investigators started to track the cash. The route was obvious, plain, and frightening. Every payment began with hospital ledgers, went through charity groups, then vanished into phantom corporations. These businesses possessed no suites, no staff, and no goods, only signatures. The autographs belonged to actual people, men and women who had vowed to defend the public. A district magistrate had authorized urgent health transfers that were never checked. A municipal sanitary auditor had stamped consent on midnight deliveries. An officer had deleted files from law enforcement systems. A bank executive had unlocked numerous secure boxes under various aliases. Every individual acted a minor role. Separately, the roles signified nothing. Combined, they created a barrier. For average residents, these were esteemed people. They talked at fundraising banquets. They grasped hands at neighborhood gatherings. They stood for pictures with sick people and contributors. Externally, they were icons of faith. Behind locked entries, they authorized documents that permitted felony to travel unhindered. In the initial 2 days following the busts, the count of internal reviews tripled. Civic offices were instantly hectic. Magistrates were summoned for interviews. Police commanders opened dossiers they had not viewed in ages. Bank supervisors hunted through transfers they once cleared without doubt. The ancient confidence that systems shielded the populace now seemed shaky. A gathering occurred at the State House. The chamber was packed with lawmakers, hospital bosses, and police chiefs. The atmosphere was somber. Many of them had known Amina Hassan in person. They had commended her efforts, given her plaques, and penned notes of endorsement. Now those same folks gazed at images of confiscated body parts, narcotics, firearms, and money. Someone asked what they had overlooked. Nobody replied. The quiet was more deafening than any reason. In villages throughout Ohio, residents unsealed their post and discovered news updates. Parish rooms filled with senior citizens who desired explanations. They talked slowly and cautiously, as if scared of uttering the incorrect thing. One lady stood with a copied picture of her spouse who had perished in the clinic 5 years prior. She inquired if his records were included in the probe. A helper gave her a contact number. That was everything anyone could provide. This was not the dread of mob brutality or sidewalk offenses. This was more profound and more hurting. It stemmed from realizing that folks they relied on, people with tidy outfits, badges, and degrees, had picked gain over obligation. It was treachery without sound. It was deceit inscribed on papers stamped by bureaucrats and silently stored away. The operations did not uncover an external foe. They exposed something worse, which was a web constructed within the very systems built to preserve lives. The structure had not crumbled from the outside. It had been devoured from the inside. Word of the bust moved across Ohio like a blizzard. It started with hushed radio updates at daybreak, then shifted to regional TV by midday. Initially it seemed like a standard police maneuver, but as facts surfaced about a clinic boss, hidden operations, narcotics, and organs, people paused in shock. Medical centers were hallowed grounds. They were places where mothers took their kids, where old kin were tended to, and where existence was rescued. To learn that one of these sites had been utilized to end life seemed inconceivable. Telephone networks were jammed with calls. In villages, older inhabitants met in town halls to view the broadcast. Many of them knew Amina Hassan from press stories and benefit functions. She had been respected. She had delivered talks regarding medical availability. She had accepted honors. Now her image showed on the monitor in restraints. Some folks watched in quietness while others wept. Some grew furious, not because they grasped every nuance, but because they felt cheated. Faith is a delicate thing, and once it fractures, it cannot be fixed simply. In the bigger towns, urgent councils were convened at clinics. Managers checked every agreement, every gift, and every alliance. Physicians asked queries they had never dreamed of asking. They wondered if this could occur there, or if they had ignored warnings. Caregivers murmured in corridors, recalling patients who had not lived and asking if something had been concealed behind clinic gates. At the cargo terminal in Columbus, deliveries were halted. Crates marked as health goods were unsealed and checked by federal units. Some were empty, while others held odd documents, incorrect codes, or tools that did not fit any known operation. Every find made the narrative more grim. City offices were not ready. Leaders faced journalists who demanded reasons. They asked how this transpired. The bureaucrats did not know. The reality was basic and hurting. Nobody wished to think a dignified physician and civic figure could be tied to brutality and avarice. In homes throughout the region, seniors spoke softly. They recalled an era when systems were believed without doubt. Healers were champions. Officers were defenders. Magistrates were sagacious. Now they questioned how much had shifted, or if the facts had merely been veiled the whole time. At one neighborhood meeting, a fellow rose up. He had labored at the center years ago. His vocals trembled as he talked. He stated he recalled midnight shipments, cartons passing through rear exits, and forms that did not align. He had presumed it was standard. He had relied on the folks above him. The crowd listened quietly. Nobody faulted him. Everyone grasped how simply faith could turn into a blinder. Throughout Ohio, the identical thought surfaced repeatedly. If this transpired in one center, could it occur in another? That query moved faster than the report itself. People stared at structures they passed daily, such as offices, drugstores, and aid hubs, and asked what they truly knew about them. It was not merely dread of offenses. It was dread of trickery. The peril had been near silent and courteous. It had grinned at benefit meals and penned payments to local functions. It had dressed in a white tunic. Ohio had witnessed many tempests, but this felt distinct. This gale originated from within, and now the state had to confront a hurting fact. Trust can be shattered without a single bullet discharged. It is destroyed by autograph seals and quietness. By the third morning following the busts, Ohio was no longer the identical place it had been a week prior. The police ribbons had been taken down. The vans had ceased driving and the officers had completed gathering proof. However, the injury that counted most could not be packed, kept, or tagged. It resided inside the populace throughout the state. A silent alarm started to expand. Older inhabitants, the ones who went to offices for monthly exams and believed every physician's advice, suddenly felt insecure. Neighborhood hubs got calls from elders asking if it was still secure to go to their visits. Some declined to exit their residences. Others told their offspring they would sooner suffer ache than step into another health structure. Medical centers felt the impact instantly. Scores of planned operations were voided in one morning. Sick people with cardiac issues delayed treatments. Kin removed their relatives from recovery homes, fearing that something might occur behind shut entries. Nurses spent hours clarifying that their facility was not implicated. But the phrases brought little solace. After all, Amina Hassan's center had appeared upright too. Physicians once honored without doubt now confronted packed neighborhood councils. Village halls filled with elders clutching pictures, health invoices, and visit forms. Vocals shook as they talked. They asked how we know who to believe, who authorizes the forms that determine our treatment, and what else can be concealed inside a center. Many healers felt the burden of these queries like a private indictment, even though they had no link to the felonies. Some rose and attempted to calm the public, describing protocols, monitoring, and rules. But comfort was brittle. When faith snaps, data alone cannot reconstruct it. At the State House, the governor convened an urgent media briefing. His tone was firm, but the strain around him was unable to be veiled. He declared a statewide audit of every hospital, office, trauma center, and private health site. Thousands of sheets of documents would be reviewed. Every clarified passing from the last 10 years would be reassessed. A helpline would be launched for kin looking for responses. But even as he talked, folks watching from parlors and care homes felt a different reality. Inquiries could reveal misconduct, but they could not wipe away the dread that had already taken hold. Mothers and fathers doubted whether to take their kids for standard shots. Elders steered clear of drugstores. Parish groups formed ride shares, not for ease but so nobody had to enter a clinic alone. Regional radio speakers debated the death of faith more than the raid itself. The startle of the felonious ring had faded. What stayed was something more profound, which was a realization that peril had arrived not from dim lanes or unknowns, but from a structure folks were educated to rely on. Ohio had braved gales, deluges, and fiscal crashes before. But this was dissimilar. Those tragedies arrived from outside. This one arrived from within, from the very bodies intended to safeguard life. In the end, the biggest injury left by the center was not the narcotics, not the taken parts, nor even the fatalities. It was the hushed, sore understanding that security is not assured. And faith, once fractured, leaves a mark across a whole region. When the raids concluded and the alarms dimmed, Ohio awoke to a reality far more hurting than any banner could depict. A clinic, a site families relied on with their existence, had been transformed into a portal for drugs, pilfered tissues, and hushed deaths. But the teaching was even more profound. Peril does not always originate from the exterior. Sometimes it lurks behind barriers we never doubt. Throughout the region, folks gazed at health sheets, old scripts, and recollections of dear ones who died too abruptly. For many, this was the initial time they grasped how frail confidence can be and how simply it can be utilized against the blameless. The startle was genuine, but it bore a signal. We must remain watchful, even with the bodies we presume are secure. Yet in the center of this gloom, one reality stood high. It was the federal offices, the bureau, and the task squads who moved forward when nobody else realized what was transpiring. They pursued the proof quietly, toiled through the night, and stepped into peril so that average folks would not have to. They revealed a web that spanned regions and boundaries. And they did it with order, bravery, and a vow to shielding citizens at all costs. In times like this, we are recalled of something vital. The power of the nation is not just in its statutes or edifices. It is in the men and women ready to guard the country from menaces seen and unseen. Because of them, numerous victims will finally possess answers. Because of them, the state can start to reconstruct its faith. But fairness does not cease with one bust. It proceeds when the public declines to remain quiet. It expands when people require responsibility. And it becomes mightier when narratives like this touch every edge of the land. So if you think the public merits the facts, if you think the efforts of these offices must be honored, And if you side with fairness, press like so this inquiry reaches more individuals. Post Justice for Ohio to maintain this narrative alive. Distribute this recording to shield others from the peril that lurked behind a clinic entry. Because at the close of the day, one teaching rises above all. The nation remains secure when its populace stays informed. It stays safe when its defenders never cease battling for the truth.